Welcome to my new series, 30 recipes my mum made or I made with her, celebrating my 30 years living here in Sydney, Australia. Now we're kicking things off with the Fijian Vakalolo buns or coconut cream buns. And it's really easy to make following my mum's recipe, one that I'm sure was handed to her as well. 4 cups of plain flour in a bowl, and then you'll add 3 teaspoons of dry yeast. Now this was about 3.5 teaspoons because I used whatever was left in the little sachet. You'll mix your dry ingredients together. You'll also include in this a quarter to a half cup, depending on what you want, of sugar. You don't have to put a lot of sugar because it's not sort of sweet sort of bun. Now once this is done, you'll mix your dry ingredients together, and then in a little pot you'll warm up 1.5 cups of milk and about 70 grams of butter in there. Now you don't want it to be boiling hot because once that is all melted in and mixed, you will then add an egg into that mixture and mix it together. So mix all your dry ingredients. And while that's cooling down for you, I remember food through moments, and we grew up very poor. We didn't have a lot of money, but my mom was resilient. She could budget like no one else I knew, and she knew how to make something delicious out of nothing and how to make food go far. And this is one of those recipes that she learned to create, and she would go around and sell them at offices at lunchtime. She also learned to make, pies and cassava cake and, rotis. She could never make rotis, but she learned how to make that. And she'd go around selling it, and I'd go with her, and I just watched her put aside her shyness, put aside the shame, because she knew it was something she had to do for her kids. Now, you'll slowly, once it's cooled down a bit, the egg, butter and milk mixture, add it to the dry ingredients, mix it together. Don't add it all at once. You want to slowly add it and mix it in. Constantly do this until it begins to form into a dough. Once it's all mixed in, use your fingers to start to bring the dough together. You don't want to over knead it. You just want to sort of bring it together slowly as well and start to shape out the dough. Now once it's sort of mixed together, you can pop it out onto a flat surface and begin to knead it, or if you want to keep it in the bowl and slowly gather all the bits around the edges of the bowl so that you're not wasting anything, you can do that too. I know my mom would have done that because she was all about not wasting anything. Now, her resilience was amazing. I remember when she first started learning to bake buns. We didn't have an oven. We had a kerosene stove. And so she figured out that when you first bake it, you'd heat up we call it tavatavadi roti, which was a flat gridiron that you used to cook rotis on. So she'd heat one up, she'd lay another one down. Once it was heated, she'd lay another one down on the kerosene stove, sit the baking dish on it, and then the other hot flat iron or gridiron she'd place on top of the buns so it would brown the top a little bit as well. And I remember once it didn't quite work, so then it moved outdoors. She then got a flat tin, got coconut shells and husks, lit that and had a little fire going on the top to brown the buns. When you have nothing, the things you learn to do is amazing. And I remember watching my mom thinking, how do you do it? How do you constantly face these challenges and, come up with ideas? And she was very reliant on God, and she believed in God, and her faith in God was what kept her going, and her love for myself and my brother, Carl. Anyway, back to this dough. You can see how sort of wet it is. It's an enriched sort of dough. You want to slowly bring it together. I then use a little bit of flour to sort of bring it together. Now, don't get too worried if it's quite wet still. As I said, you can use a little bit of flour to sort of bring it together. You don't want to put a lot of flour in it because you're not trying to bulk it out too much, but you can see how sort of sticky it sort of is. That's me sprinkling a bit of flour, and I will slowly start to bring it into a ball. And as I'm doing this, slowly begin to knead it at the same time. Pull it from the outside, bring it in, and start to form that big sort of dough ball. And you can see how sort of sticky my hands are. I'm using a fork to pull all that bits onto it, and to make sure it's all mixed in. So I'm gonna sort of go back to chatting about her ingenuity that my mom had. She grew up when she was still a kid. Her biological mom, I don't know if the word is abuse, or left her to her own devices and didn't look after or care for her. And her biological dad's sister and her husband, who didn't have kids, heard about it, went, got her off her biological mom, and apparently when they went and got her, she had worms coming out of her ears. She was malnourished. She had been, basically it was child bullying, neglect and abuse. And they took her home, and they didn't have kids, and so she was their daughter, and they spoiled her. And she said she grew up with a lot when she was younger, so she didn't really learn to do much because her aunt was an amazing baker and cook, and the people around her, they had people that cleaned and cooked. And it was only after she had her own family and she had to learn to fend for herself after her and my dad had gone their separate ways. Basically, my dad used to beat her. And it got to the point where she realized this was not going to change unless she made a change. So she then left him. In that day and age, in the 70s, it was unheard of. Now, just a tip, I could have kneaded it for a bit longer, and I should have kneaded it for a little bit longer, but it's fine to knead it this much. I'm getting some oil poured all over my hand so I could rub it into the bowl and onto the dough ball, because I will cover it with some Glad wrap and it will sit to double in size. I want it to double in size. So I could have probably kneaded it a bit longer, because I don't feel like it actually doubled to where it could have gone. But the end result is delicious, and it ended up rising, you'll see. So you'll cover this with some Glad wrap and set it aside and let it double in size. You want it to rise before you will then break it down or punch it to flatten it. You will then divide that into, I think, about 15 individual bun pieces. That will then be added to a greased tray, and you will let that rise again before you bake it. Here am I punching it down. And then I'm going to sort of flatten it out a little, or I rolled it out into sort of a log shape and then cut it up into pieces, or I flatten it and cut into pieces. You set it into a greased tray and then you let that rise, and you can see here that it's developed a lovely rise. I brushed it with a little egg wash, so it gives it a lovely little golden color, the top of the buns. I then slowly added 2 cups of coconut cream. This is just plain coconut cream. I haven't made it into a syrup or added sugar or anything. And you want your buns submerged. Now, this is quite different from the Tongan or Samoan pani popo, where after it is baked in the coconut cream, they make a coconut cream sauce with sugar, sort of a syrup, and add that to the baked. This isn't like that. Once it bakes and the coconut cream dissipates and dissolves into the bun, it is a drier bun, and it is absolutely delicious. This enriched dough is so nice. My cousin, who doesn't normally like these pani popos, loves this Fijian Vakalolo bun. You can hear my cousin talking in the background, telling us a story about the video and me recorded. Now the Lolo buns were steaming hot, and I had to add some butter. So this is salted butter. It was so delicious. It just took me right back to my mom. First time I making this for us.
Voice like that, eh?
This brought back so many memories of my mom and the wonderful moments we shared together. And I love how food does this. It was also absolutely delicious just on its own without butter as well. So I hope you enjoyed the first of my 30 recipes my mom made for me, celebrating my 30 years in Australia. Love you guys. Keep watching, share, like, and subscribe.